Kia ora koutou katoa, ko Mimi O'Callaghan aho. I'm from Engineering New Zealand and the Diversity Agenda, and I welcome you all to today's webinar. I want to say a big thank you for tuning in and being engaged with the work that the Diversity Agenda is doing, and a special welcome to our members of the Diversity Agenda. If your firm is not a member, then we ask you encourage your organisation to join. It's free and will give them the help and resources with diversity and inclusion. And of course, to make the ultimate commitment, we're asking firms to sign up for the Diversity Agenda Accord. This launched at Parliament earlier this year, and you can find out more info on this through our website. And lastly, for you as individuals, please make sure you sign up on our website for our monthly email newsletter dispatch. For those of you who are Accord signatories, as you'll be aware, we recently sent out the survey request for your data. This is now due. However, we know it's been a really busy month full of adjustment and understand if you haven't had the capacity to complete it yet. Today's webinar will be very helpful with the completion of the survey, so we ask you utilise the information provided and return it to us by early next month. We will be sending out a link to the recording of this webinar. And so on to today's event, presented by Stephen McDougall. If you don't measure, you don't know. Stephen is a director at Studio Pacific Architecture, a passionate supporter of the Diversity Agenda and an Accord signatory member. Last year, Studio Pacific undertook a thorough review of all their employees, and today Stephen is kindly sharing his valuable insight on measurement and how it benefits business. So thanks again to you all for joining. Enjoy the webinar and please give a warm virtual welcome to Stephen. Any questions asked throughout the webinar will be answered at the end, providing time allows it. Thanks. Over to you, Stephen.
Mimi, can people hear me? I just get a little note from Leanne or Mimi if I can be heard.
Yes, Stephen, we can hear you coming through, so great.
Kia ora tātou, ngā mihi o te ahi, ko Stephen toku ingoa. Thanks for having me. I'm going to talk through our experience of measuring the why, the how, using our processes and initiatives to illustrate one way to do it. I will include a little of what we found, what we learned, and what we've done since. I am going to turn my camera off shortly. I don't want to look at myself apart from anything else. But I'm a sort of bit player in all of this. But just as perhaps a pre-intro intro and perhaps a plea of sorts, and I appreciate that I'm probably preaching to the converted here. However, in the theme of not wasting a crisis in these extraordinary times where our climate is in crisis, Black Lives Matter is front and centre in our country and around the world, and of course COVID-19 is around us all. I'd like to suggest that diversity should be in this group in the search for equity and ultimately what is fair, right and just. With a requirement for all of us to work differently through the various levels that we've experienced, now is the time to consider and reset our work practices. This is relevant to diversity where flexibility of working has been, or for some people and organisations, a struggle to comprehend and accept. Let's hope these times have changed now, and now that we can all see how effective and efficient we can be, and how physically seeing someone working is not essential, and that trusting people is actually easy. I believe we have short memories and suggest that we don't waste this crazy time. All changes, climate, racial, and diversity require conscious and deliberate actions. Let's not waste this time. Let's be conscious and let's be deliberate in our actions. So now a little bit about today. I'm going to run through a little of our studio's measurement over the last few years, what we thought, what was different to what we thought, what we learned, and what has changed. What you'll see is that we're very far from perfect, but we've been brave enough to lift the lid and look under our own hood. Some of these conversations and initiatives have been difficult and have made people uneasy, but are necessary. I'd like to start by acknowledging our hardworking admin team who have raked through years of data to collect reliable historic information. We don't have a human resources software package, So the data collection has all been manual, so no mean feat. We, and I, had a hunch that we were where we were at, what we were doing well, and as I'm an optimist, I have to say that I was wrong, unfortunately, on many fronts. I had thought one thing, but the numbers said another. What it taught us is if you don't measure, you don't know. While I'm also not a demographer, taking a one-year snapshot is important, but will only tell part of the story. Comparative data covering a number of years where you can see patterns, trends, or variability is much more useful and informative. A trend or pattern tells a very different story to variability. Variability suggests that in the diversity field, decisions can or are made on merit or for some other basis rather than any specific criteria, i.e. gender. To measure also allows us to focus our decisions, to make them deliberate, with change based on fact rather than hunches, which, as I've noted, are not necessarily correct, and in our case, often wrong. So that's enough from me visually, and I'll disappear. I'm going to run through a series of background slides to start around the importance of diversity and the basis on what makes up diversity. As the slide notes, of course, diversity is not just gender. However, for the moment and to date, the diversity agenda has been focused on gender, although this is now broadening. Our measurement at the studio up until now has also been the same. Identifying the potential for diversity isn't enough. We need to activate an environment which actually values and welcomes everyone and their diversity in background, beliefs, and thinking that they bring to the table. Our broader behaviours, attitudes, and language are also very important. Just a reminder of the underlying premise of the diversity agenda: 20% more women in architecture and engineering at all levels by 2021. If you don't measure, how can you confirm and monitor any changes? At the studio, we've collected data back to 2013. Having said that, we'd previously measured back to 2016, but realised we had to go back further in order to properly track trends, patterns, and variability for reasons as I've noted earlier. One of our biggest challenges faced at the studio is our high retention rate. This has sometimes limited the opportunity for others to move into senior positions within an organisational structure that is top-heavy. It also limits opportunities for more gender diversity at senior level, given the current composition of our management team, particularly at director and principal level. To date, appointments and promotions based on meritocracy have been the premise for decision-making at the studio. Following last year's measurement and findings, we've undertaken change at senior level to address some of the imbalance. A little more on that later. The historic data collection was completed with the goal of establishing clear and appropriate metrics regarding the recruitment, retention, advancement, and representation of women and minority genders at the studio. In order to close the gap, we needed to know how big it is and what was causing it. Clear data on the diversity of the studio's talent pipeline and business over years was necessary in order to accurately identify issues and launch targeted interventions to solve them. Monitoring the pay gap between men and women provides a good baseline measure, but is not enough. While metrics are important, it's also important to measure more than a person's presence at a workplace. Best practice also involves measuring more subjective perspectives and gathering feedback about business diversity practices and policies. Perceptions such as feelings of powerlessness or lack of influence are important, along with how often people are invited to attend pivotal meetings, how much they get involved in key decision-making processes, and how they are encouraged to communicate. From 2013 to 2019, we were able to collate a range of data on a variety of key indicators. We dug deep on these areas in order to get... Sorry, we just got some scaffolding being removed from the studio, so I hope you're not hearing too much of that. We dug deep on these areas in order to get an understanding of what was really going on, to see if there were patterns and trends, and to confirm or not our hunches. As noted, the numbers don't lie. So it was a bit of a good, the bad, and some ugly. Some of our hunches were correct, others not. We were happy to share our collection data fields. We're very happy to share our broader collection data, fields, and criteria if anyone would like, following this webinar. It's worth noting that the larger the sample size, the more accurate the data. This will suit the larger engineering and architectural practices, but smaller organisations will see wider disparity due to smaller sample sizes and the ability for numbers to be skewed because of small clusters impacting in a bigger way on a small organisation. Our collection required 306 separate data sets, so once again acknowledging our team's efforts in collating this data. It was painstaking and required a thoroughness and accuracy. The parameters for measurement below, as set out in the diversity agenda's accord, will set a picture of us as an industry, or the two industries, but also as individual organisations, and will allow comparisons to be made and changes to be monitored over coming years. To say that I'd like to suggest that the criteria is broadened for the next year's measure to incorporate a number of other range of topics and perhaps collecting a wider range of information. It is important to establish criteria by which to measure and keep this consistent year to year to establish and ensure that comparative and consistency of measurement of that data. This slide illustrates the criteria that we set of our staff level and time frame for those levels to illustrate the example of setting criteria. You have to know what you're measuring, and that consistency year on year is important. As noted, our results were variable, the good, the bad, and some ugly. With lots of data, we had to analyse it closely to ensure we had a real understanding of what that data meant. What could we learn? What should we change? We looked for patterns and trends, and we looked for variability. My view, again, not as a demographer, was that the variability suggests decisions are made based on things other than perceptions or bias, conscious or unconscious. I guess what I'm saying is that if we see a trend year after year, the same result says something. It's either okay or perhaps it's not. If there's variability, it suggests decisions are made for a reason at that time. And I kind of hope that I'm right in that assumption. I want to slow down on three aspects of in our measurement that surprised me. Firstly, the pay gap was surprising. There was one. We do all sorts of things to try and avoid this. We do pay reviews every year in September and October. We run a pay parity audit every year. We also undertake a calibration exercise where we ask our leadership and project leads to input on individuals to inform that calibration. But the pay gap still fell through the crack. Not across the board, but there were signs of one. Without making excuses, this was a surprise. We have analysed why, allowing us to better understand for our next review. The NZAA REM survey issued at the end of last year and outside of last year's measurement timeframe for us was very timely and an important tool for us to reset the balance for this year's measure. We're measuring this now, so it'll be interesting to see if we've made a change. We're also really very much looking forward to this year's NZAA data collection in September, October. Secondly, measuring how many years it takes to register also showed disparity, but with some variability. Why does it generally take longer for women to register than men? Is it parental leave? Is it related to individual circumstance or something more sinister? We're hoping that it's related to individual circumstance, but there's more work to go on that. Our third area of disparity was, why do we have more male project architect leads than female? Is it just because of our inherent gender difference at senior level? No, because we have equanimity between men and women at senior level. We are actually measuring this now, so it would be interesting to see if it's changed. But in fact, hot off the press this morning, it doesn't paint a pretty picture of this year's result, albeit that we haven't been able to look at our broader pool of people and so on. So, but what it suggests to me is that we have to be even more deliberate in our actions to change things. I know for one that I've been much more conscious of these issues as we establish project teams and responsibilities and our general behaviour since our 2019 measure and a sort of discussion on these topics. Following our measurement, we presented the results to the studio with a broad-ranging discussion following. We then asked 3 open-ended questions of the studio. What thoughts are promoted by seeing the diversity measurement information and results? What are the 3 things we could do to change diversity at Studio Pacific? And what are your other thoughts? And this is where the really interesting stuff happened. We had about 50% respondents. Some people put significant and considerable effort and thought into their responses with pages of text. Once again, it was the good, the bad, and the ugly, but very thought-provoking, very dense, and very worthy. And I have to say, I had to read it 4 times before getting an understanding of the depth and breadth of that thought. Following the measurement and the open-ended questions, we undertook our analysis. We asked our diversity and inclusion working group to identify common themes and suggestions. Some of these are still under consideration, but we have implemented change. We have 2 new board members, both women. We have 3 new principals, 2 of them are women. We think differently about the decisions we make with our team establishment, and we're much more conscious of our actions. However, we can and must do more. But we are on a journey. If we hadn't measured and spent the time analysing, we wouldn't know where we are, what we're doing well, what we're not doing well. Hunches are not enough and are often wrong, but measurement doesn't lie. So just in conclusion, what does it take to measure? It takes time and it takes a commitment to knowing and understanding, but it's actually not difficult. And it's really important and critical to know what to change. I'd like to leave you with a plea and a request to make the most of these crazy times, where reset seems to be the right thing to do, to be deliberate and conscious with your actions, and to recognise that measurement informs and allows better decisions. Kia ora, ngā mihi nui. So that's me in that part. I'm not sure how we move to questions, and I'm not sure if there are any questions.
Hey Stephen, yeah, we haven't had any questions posted as yet, so I have asked people if they have any questions, please do type these in the chat panel now, so that would be great if you could do that.
As I noted, that we're very happy to share in a broader sense all of our questions. We won't share our information, of course, that's confidential, but we can share all our data fields if anyone is interested, and perhaps that's done through either directly to the studio or it could be through that we could post it on the DA website, if that were helpful.
We have got attendees typing at present, so it may be that some of them are typing in some questions. So yes, we have got a question come in from Doreen. She said that you've mentioned that you were surprised to find disparity in remuneration. What were your findings for the origins of the disparity?
So what we, with all of our processes, is that we thought that we had weeded out any opportunity for any disparity in any pay gap. One of our issues is that if we dump our, and at the time of measurement, there were 3 male directors and a number of male principals. So that's skews the numbers immediately because, and assuming they all have a higher pay bracket and remuneration, is that a lot of men at the top in terms of pay scale means that it does skew that. So even despite that, as we measure the individual levels across it, we did notice that there were some pay inconsistencies. And it's probably worth noting that in the clusters, and I mentioned the small sample size, is that once you get down to a level, and let's say we might be comparing 5 or 10 people, is that it's very easy to skew the numbers by within that small data set. So again, not making any excuses, but it has meant that we have been much more conscious about what we do and how we do that. As I did note the REM survey, and that was a great document for us because it not only compared the various levels, and I think that the next round will probably compare more levels of experience and so on, but it also compared at a national level and also at a regional level. So we were able to drill into where we sat and benchmarking ourselves against other organisations of a similar size. So Darian, I hope that answers your question. Tracy, your question there, what systems did you get most of your data from the HRIS? We don't actually have an HRIS, and so it was manual. So we needed to identify what we were looking for, and then which went through not only the standard ones of remuneration, and I've mentioned the 2 others about the years to register and so on, but the criteria was much more significant than that. And so we kind of made it up, and no doubt our crew would have been looking for other examples to benchmark against and to set our criteria. But we do need to have a better system of collecting that information. Now, Kate, can you please tell me how many staff you have at Studio Pacific and what challenges you think you could face that could face a small business undertaking diversity measurement? We have around 70 people, and so that includes our broad range of architecture, landscape, and so on, as well as our admin team. Facing a small organisation, the difficulty is, I guess there's 2 things. The good part is that comparing year to year is what you need to do, in my view, and the difficulty of a small organisation, and as I tried to sort of suggest, was that if you've got a small cluster of, let's say, graduates, and there's 3 of them, and that small, you only need 1 person to be doing something that's 30%, so that the percentage change is very different, very large across a small organisation. If you're in a larger organisation, the data pool is, and the trends and so on would be, well, if 1 or 2 people were doing something, that percentage is significantly less. That makes sense. Much interested in seeing your processes in more detail, and I'm not sure what the next bit means, along with a copy of this person. I'm not quite sure what that means, but we, as I say, we're very happy to share our data fields, what we explored, and we'll do that through the DA. Hi, Ali. You've mentioned gender diversity only, and I think I mentioned that was the focus of the original part of the diversity agenda, and you'll see the questions that the Accord are asking, which broadens that. We are very conscious of wanting to measure that in our own way, and so as we move forward, I think that the DA and the Accord's aspirations are broader than just gender. This was potentially a criticism of the diversity agenda to begin with, but you have to start somewhere, and I think that was the premise, but my view is it is now broadening. So Vathni, where do you see the next focus area following on from gender? Well, I think I think it's across the board. I don't think we can drop gender. I think we have to keep going at it. We haven't solved it. We haven't solved it as a business or an organisation, and we certainly haven't solved it as a country. And so a long way to go there. The more people doing it, and as I said at the beginning, I think that we're probably in this format preaching to the converted. Yeah, let's keep going on this for a bit longer. And from Amanda, how do you guard against the perception of appointments being made to balance the statistics rather than on merit, and that you know the numbers are? Well, a very good question, and we've debated this long and hard. While we have made changes, they are also based on meritocracy, and so there's a visibility, and I guess that consciousness of a decision, and that we're very lucky to have all the people we do have, and they're here for a reason. And we, apart from liking them, they're all clever and smart. And so through that appointment process is that I think perhaps being really focused and getting the right person for the job is still our key premise. From Tina, has the current context changed your thinking, or do you anticipate that will change? Good question. As I said at the beginning, I think I would like to throw diversity into the bigger mix of change, and I've noted about flexibility of work hours and things. We are doing a piece of work at the moment where we're asking people what worked and didn't work through the lockdown, and we are looking to very much change our processes. We had about 30% of our people doing flexible hours and previously, and we have noticed there's a desire to change that and to increase it, and we're very supportive of it. As architects and perhaps engineers, is the tricky bit is for those who have big drawing bits of technology, is that doing some days in the studio and some days at home is a challenge for technology where you have to duplicate. And so while we do have some spare machines, that it's limited. So at the moment, people are making a choice, and we're supporting them in that. We are. I'm a technophobe, and even I could work teams, and found it incredibly effective and efficient. So I do like the social side of work and being around people. So I suspect that that's never going to disappear, but we will or are noticing there's a lot more people who are electing to do reduced hours, and whether that be compressed weeks or just shortened weeks, and also that flexibility around working from home. And also I think the perception has changed, that in the olden days, i.e. 2.5 months ago or 3 months ago, if you weren't at work, if you were working from home, you had your feet up and you're in bed and asleep in and all of that. And I think that perception has changed dramatically. Tracy, thank you very much. Jack, did any of your staff reveal any praise or issues around studio support for management of physical mental disability issues? This is important in regard to diversity in the workplace. I guess when I say the good, the bad, and the ugly, and through both our results and our open-ended questions, there was a lot of good, and I guess that people are, and I did note early on that about the hard conversations, and they are hard, and they are make people feel uneasy, and I guess trying to invoke an environment where safety, people feel safe doing that. We have got a number of mental health trained first aiders, as we call them, in the studio, and so over this time they've been pretty active and having a lot of chat. Insecurities around coming back into the workplace and even the city have been issues, but I guess setting up processes where people can find that support, and that hopefully that the studio provides a safe place for people. We'd like to think that there's always someone that you can talk to. In the past, we have had an outside person running alongside us, and for 4 or 5 years, and unfortunately, he's moved out of town and to another part of his life, so we don't have that any longer, but we are looking for someone else. That was someone who individuals could make contact with at any time, and having that independence, I guess, and to discuss issues with, so being able to deal with that remotely was often a great thing for individuals without seeing it as having to bring it back into the studio. Beth, thank you for sharing. I'm curious to hear about how you communicated this through the organisation and the time it took to begin the research and analysis to begin being able to implement. The collection of data, we had always measured, and as I think I noted or some time back, is that we were measuring staff numbers and both and gender across different levels, and then it was only last year that we thought we needed to go broader than that. And having said that, we were probably collecting other data as well, but just off the top of my head. But that broad range of knowing about project architects, and if we hadn't measured that, I would have no idea. My hunch was that the right people were doing the right job for the right reasons, and kind of that was that, and that my hunch was that it was about 50-50. Well, it wasn't. And so, as I noted just before, is that the data come out this morning is even worse than last year, or it's just marginally worse. And so, even though you can be deliberate, you can not get it right. Having said that, we haven't been able to assess the whole numbers of our work, the team to see where that sits in our seniority. The research was having enough data or enough historical data, and while it did take time to do, having a human resources software would have been much easier. And in terms of sharing it with the studio, we've had various, our diversity working group has presented a number of topics through the years, and this was a large one last year. And then our diversity working group splitting off and doing the analysis of the open-ended questions. We had our last one was on the 20th of February, I think, and then of course the world changed. So we haven't got to our new measurement just yet, or the broader one. I think, have I covered those? Sure. How did you set up a diversity working group? What do they do, and how do they factor your leadership team decisions? We have, for better or worse, 15 working groups, and these cover off things like business as usual, IT, marketing, and finance, and then we have a research. We have our community, which is our outreach and spending time in our local community, supporting various schools and the like. We have Te Waharua, we have diversity. So, and diversity and well-being. So, and of course we have health and safety and well-being as well. So that's a sort of run. There is quite a lot of overlap between different working groups. The team is made up, the individuals come and go a bit. What's really nice is that, and one thing we have been tracking is the chairs of these working groups. There's another renowned data field of the chairs and their agenda, and also the team makeup. So looking at that, and when we cast those, is we are conscious of who is in that and what they're made up of. And my memory is that there's about 5, and they are a mix of people and ages and ethnicity and experience. So that they an important group, as are all the others, of how we sort of set ourselves up as a studio. How do they factor back into our leadership? We have an ongoing, each working group has a kind of working budget, and which we sign off every year. That's both for internal activities and external activities, and some kind of get dialed up and dialed down a bit as the years and what we need to concentrate on as a studio change. Fair to say, our Te Waharoa group and our diversity group have had have had a big circle in terms of focus over the last few years, and I don't see that changing. In terms of our leadership and how that factors in, I guess that's just that awareness, and it just becomes, part of who we are, hopefully. Do we talk about it overtly? Yes, we do. And do we make our decisions based on that? I'd like to think it's still meritocracy, but can't help but have an eye on diversity decisions. As I said, we're not perfect, and far from it, but we're on a journey.
Great, Stephen. We still have some time for more questions, so it'd be great if anybody else does have any questions, if they're able to type these in the chat panel. If there are no further questions, we would then potentially draw to a close. So it'd be great if anybody does have any questions that they may like to ask, that they could type these in the chat panel. We'll just give you a few more moments to do that. We've got a couple of people typing, so we'll just see if they have any questions that they are wishing to raise.
One from Emily, as an employee, curious to find out more about this kind of data in one's workplace, and how would you approach your leadership team to ask these questions? So very good question, and it has been at various functions and conversations that I've been involved in over the years. Is how do you get this in front of people who are just not on their radar, and it's not part of their focus, and so on. And I think it's about starting with low-hanging fruit and identifying some easy grabs. We posted a list of initiatives that we did on the DA when it first was initiated, so 18 months or so ago, and it might be that we repost those, and they were kind of initiatives that we were doing as a studio, and so it was the kind of easy, medium, and kind of harder ones. And of course, we've now since moved on from some of that, but it might be worth having a look at that, and I'm hoping that the DA could repost those as a thought. And again, we don't know everything, and I'd be really interested in what other people think about this, because it is tricky when and I noted at the beginning around that flexibility of working. Just because you're not in the studio doesn't mean you're not working, and so that proving this time, making the most of it, and saying, well, hey, I worked at home and I was very effective. I'd like to do that on Thursday afternoons or Tuesdays or Fridays or whatever it is. So yeah, maybe going in at some low-hanging fruit, and also I think just starting a conversation. And I know that, as I mentioned, that some of it's hard and difficult and being awkward and so on, but if you don't start, you can't really progress. But if you wanted to, very happy to share any of that, some of those initiatives. Do you do exit interviews with resigning employees to identify if any workplace factors impacting different groups' decisions to stay or go? Yes, we do. And we take that pretty seriously, and that's in in the what we can learn world, and of course everyone leaves for different reasons, but that's a really important part, and we do report back on what they said. We don't conduct them, and we hope that our practice manager, Paula, who undertakes them, is a safe place that they can feel that they can say whatever they like as they run out the door. And so it's been intriguing over the years to see what people's thoughts are and what we can learn from that. You say you've been given a budget. What are some of the investments you've made in the DO? Well, I suppose it's probably in the certainly attendance of diversity agenda events and diversity works events, but bringing outside people in, and most of the expenditure, to be honest, is around time for the individual, so that they are doing that in their daytime and their work, and so that we budget for them to be able to do that. It's not something that needs to happen out of hours and is not extra. It's part of the job. Kate, a general question for the diversity agenda. Would it be possible for the diversity agenda to come up with generic diversity survey which individual companies could tailor? I'll leave that to the diversity agenda, but you would think so. Bridget, hi everyone, Bridget from DA will share the preso with some of the resources Steve talked about in the next Dispatch newsletter. Thanks, Bridget. You can just subscribe. Perhaps another little thing is that we are Bridget, Sean, Mimi, and a few from Homes. I can't see if they're on the online, but we have a small team who we meet sort of every 6 weeks and setting an agenda for Wellington events, which sometimes spray across the country. But if anyone's got any great ideas or thoughts on other diversity events, we're very pleased to hear that.
Again, we just have a few more moments for some more questions if anybody has them. So it'd be great if anybody has any questions to type them in really quickly. That would be great. I think, Stephen, that there is no more questions that people are raising at this point in time, so I'm sure that we can bring this presentation to a close. As has been mentioned by Bridget, we have recorded the presentation, so there will be an email coming through later in the Diversity Agenda's Dispatch newsletter, so stay tuned for further information as that comes through. I would like, on behalf of the Diversity Agenda Group, to thank you, Stephen, for your great presentation. Always a great deal of information for people to be thinking about. So on behalf of them, I'd like to thank you, and also all of the participants who have come into our webinar. So thank you and have a great day.